Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hello and welcome to Focus on Health. I'm your host, Peggy Mello. Today's guest is Donna Lochner, a licensed mental health counselor who has a private practice in Albany. Welcome, Donna.
Hi, Peggy.
Why don't you tell the viewers a little bit about your background and what you specialize in?
As you mentioned, I'm a New York State licensed mental health counselor. My master's degree is in counseling. And for about 14 years now, I've been working with people in a collaborative, strength-based kind of way. What I mean by that is rather than just focusing on people's problems and weaknesses, capitalizing on their strengths and their abilities. And some of the areas that I have a special interest in are energy-based psychology, energy-based body work, working with people with trauma who've had neglect, abuse, or maltreatment as children. Eating disorders is an area I've done a lot of work with, and some really kind of what in the field we call garden variety, stress, anxiety, depression, those kinds of things.
So today we're talking about how to deal with difficult people.
Yes.
So how did you become interested in this area?
It's kind of twofold. One is I was noticing in my practice that a lot of my clients were struggling with relationship issues with people who they had trouble communicating with, being assertive with, were having conflicts with. But the other piece is that I had realized, as we all can be, that sometimes I'm a difficult person. And I had begun to really think about how do people deal with those of us who can be difficult at times. And so that's when I started putting together components of a 2.5-hour program that I present on this topic. That's how it got started.
Okay. And let's talk about some situations or examples of that.
There are so many different kinds of situations. It could be involving coworkers, bosses, family members, your kids, your friends, the neighbors. Some of the kinds of things that I hear about fairly frequently are, for example, in the workplace, a boss who is, I don't want to say yelling at, but who is disciplining or talking to an employee in front of clients or other staff that feels really humiliating and inappropriate. I hear a lot about mothers or mother-in-laws who are intrusive in their adult children's lives, who insist that their adult children act in certain ways, raise their children in certain ways. They give opinions frequently or criticisms when they're not asked for. Or it could be a situation with a friend who is demanding, who has a sense of entitlement and insists that you do her favors or acts in ways that just really make you uncomfortable that you want to address.
And of course, all of us find that we have to be in public dealing with others that we don't know, who are
Yes.
strangers to us. And, well, my mom always taught me that I had to be calm, cool, and collected and polite with everyone that I came across, no matter how frustrated I was.
Which is not terrible advice overall. I have to say one of my personal pet peeves also is bad customer service. And it happens a lot. And I've fantasized about doing customer service trainings. But yes, I mean, dealing with the public or being a customer in a public situation can also be challenging, especially because a lot of people really don't have great communication or conflict resolution skills.
And this also hits home with me because a third of my time working at the library is dealing with the public on the front lines. So I want them to be satisfied with their interactions with me, and and I also have to be dealing with certain personalities.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, what are some things to keep in mind when you're dealing with someone that's irritated, that's demanding? What can we do?
I think, and not to oversimplify it, but I think one of the first things to do is for us to calm ourselves down, to take a breath.
Take a breath.
To oftentimes, if we can speak calmly and slowly and not match the other person's intense language or intense speed of their language or the energy behind their irritation, it helps to calm us, which can help to be calming.
And to not raise your voice.
Yes. Also, I think that it's really helpful, anything that we can do to lower our own reactivity when someone is coming at us is helpful. And one of the ways to do that is to remind ourselves, this is not about me. If I don't take it personally that this person is being cranky and crabby, I might have a tendency to think, who do they think they are talking to me, and what? But if I can remind myself, this isn't about me, this is about the other person's frustration or angst, that's another way that I can lower my own reactivity in dealing with them.
So instead of reacting, we're responding
Yes,
to their problem.
Exactly. Responding, not reacting. It's also helpful to separate the issue from the personality. For example, if you have a coworker who's always late to a meeting and you feel resentful about that because that takes up your time as well, if you focus on, rather than saying, you know, you're always late and you can't be on time, which is attacking their personality, focusing on the issue. When you come late, or when any of us come late, it really kind of puts us behind for the rest of the day. And I'd really appreciate it if we could start our meetings on time, so that we're focusing on the behavior that we're taking issue with, not so much the person or their personhood.
But that has to be done in private and not correcting them in front of others.
I think often it's a good idea to correct people privately. However, if you have a group that's getting together and someone comes in late, or a number of people come in late, I think that it's okay to say, if several people are doing that, that in front of the group. But you're correct that most of the time we don't want to create more defensiveness or more hostility by embarrassing someone in front of their peers or the public, whoever it may be.
I think whenever I have the opportunity to take the person in to, let's say, an office to talk to them, and that's only when I feel safe and I don't feel like I'm physically threatened,
Right.
And that
right.
kind of doesn't make them uncomfortable thinking, oh my God, everybody's listening.
Yes. I think one of the things that we really want to keep in mind is when we do anything that looks like blaming, shaming, attacking, criticizing the person, that's going to raise their level of defensiveness and make it less likely that you're going to be able to resolve a situation in a way that feels reasonable and relatively pleasant.
And I mean, I've always thought that body language is key. When I'm out at the reference desk, I like to try to have an open look to me so that people will find me approachable and will be willing to ask me a question. And being that I'm always busy having to do a lot of things in one work day, I usually take work out with me to the desk, and I feel like if I'm in the middle of totaling numbers for invoices and somebody's in front of me, I have to completely drop what I'm doing and really look like I'm there to help them and not to do my
challenging.
invoices.
I mean, in a case like that, what I might do is say, I'll be with you in just a moment, so that you're acknowledging. I mean, there's nothing more annoying than standing and someone's not making eye contact, they don't acknowledge your presence, and you think, am I supposed to say something? But I think that it's really appropriate to say, I'll be with you in just a moment. The person feels heard. Okay, I'm going to be taken care of in a short period of time. I like your idea about the openness. In psychobabble, in counseling training, we call those attending skills. They're a sort of listening skill where you make eye contact, you have an open body posture, so your arms aren't crossed, you're not leaning away, so you're leaning forward or at least not leaning away, open body posture, nodding while someone's talking. So your body language is saying, I'm hearing you, I'm with you, I'm listening. And oftentimes when people are feeling upset, not always, one of the reasons that they're feeling upset is because they're afraid that they won't be heard. And if you are sitting in a way that your posture, your facial features, that you're approachable, you're upping the chance that you'll have a pleasant interaction with this person.
I also think that eye contact is also key. I mean, when you're I can't look down at my papers while I'm helping them.
Right.
I can't look off into the distance while I'm helping them. I have to look at them.
And the unspoken message, if you're not looking at the person, is, I don't really care what you're saying. Other things are more interesting to me. Go away. And that doesn't facilitate an interaction that's going to feel good to either of you.
But I think assertiveness is also important as well. I mean, when we're the consumer and we're in that situation.
When I think of some of the components of assertiveness, I think of being willing and able to stand up for ourselves, being able to say no to unwanted or what we might consider unreasonable requests, and dealing with manipulative criticism. I mean, there are other parts to that, but you're absolutely correct. Whether I'm the customer in the situation or I'm as you are, the provider of customer service, or even in interpersonal relationships, we need to have certain skills, assertiveness skills, to be able to even to ask for what we need or want, or to set limits on someone's behavior. If someone starts yelling at you, that it's perfectly appropriate to say, you know what, I really need for you to lower your voice. I can't continue this conversation in this manner. And those are assertiveness skills.
And let's talk about worst case scenario. Somebody's yelling at you.
I think that one of the questions that we want to ask ourselves is, am I physically in danger, or am I feeling threatened because this person is pushing some of my buttons and I'm feeling threatened emotionally? Certainly if you feel like you're not safe, you don't want to try to be dealing with someone who's that irate. And one of the questions that I would suggest that we all ask ourselves is, given the level of anger reactivity, the words coming out of this person's mouth, what's the likelihood that I will be able to help this person downshift to a calmer mode so that we can problem solve? And if I really don't think that I can do that or that's possible, then what I might want to do is disengage, but disengage in a way that saves face, not in a way that says, you're out of control, I am not talking to you while you're like that, because that tends to make people more angry. But saying, it's really clear that this situation has gotten heated, and I think it would be better for us to talk when we can come together and talk about it in a way that doesn't feel so heated. That allows someone to save face, it doesn't shame them, and all of the things that I'm talking about, it's not about trying to be nice. Not that niceness is a bad thing, but the really bottom line that we need to continue to ask ourselves in these kinds of situations is, what reaction or response from me is most likely to get resolution of this problem? Not so much what's a nice thing to do, and I mean, politeness is wonderful, but the bottom line is, what's likely to get us out of this tangle? Now, when you mention assertiveness, another thing that I think happens is when we are criticized in a way that is manipulative. And what I mean by that is when someone is trying to alter our behavior by trying to make us feel bad by criticizing us. There was an example that we had been talking about earlier about a patron who wanted to use a piece of equipment in a way that really wasn't okay. And when she was told that that wasn't possible, she started, well, you guys aren't friendly. And, and she was trying to criticize in a way that would manipulate the employee to feel bad and feel like, oh, I should be nicer. And so learning how to deal with manipulative criticism is a really helpful part of dealing with difficult people, since when people are being difficult, they will often try to get their point across by making you feel bad.
I think for me, the challenge is coming up with the right words.
Yeah.
The moment that it happens, and I'm always replaying the situation in my head and saying, well, hindsight is 20/20. Well,
Absolutely.
That's what I should have said.
Yeah.
But it's really hard when you're faced with this kind of reaction from someone.
It is.
To control yourself and to get your brain to work so that you can actually come up with a response to
Yes. And I think really what that takes is a lot of practice over a period of time, and that we need to be gentle with ourselves, that we're not always going to come up just like that with the best responses.
So what about apologizing blamelessly? What is the trick of doing that? I would love to learn how to do that.
Apologizing blamelessly is a tool when someone is upset about a situation and you are not the reason, you did not create that, but you want them to feel understood. An example that I use when I'm doing my presentation is, I really don't like to be late, and I belong to a professional organization that had kept moving its location, and it was meeting in a hospital. And if anybody who's been to any local hospital in the area knows that it's like a maze getting from one place to another. And by the time I finally ended up in the room at the right time, I was late because I was up to this elevator and over here and down there. I was really cranky. And the woman sitting at the desk taking the money and writing the registrants' names down looked up, and I was glaring at her because I was angry and feeling kind of cranky. And I said, I spent 15 minutes trying to find this place because the signs were incorrect. And she said one of the worst things she could have possibly said.
Uh-oh. You should have started out earlier.
I'm new here. It's not my fault. If she had simply said, I'm really sorry that happened. I'm really sorry that the signs really were not placed properly. She wasn't taking blame. She was simply saying, I'm sorry that happened. I hear you. That's frustrating. That's annoying. That would have calmed me right down. But when she said, I'm new here, that just made me really want to say something else. So that's what apologizing blamelessly is. We're not saying, I'm a jerk, I did something wrong, but I'm sorry that that happened.
So what is the art of criticizing behavior and not people directly? How do you do that without getting their defenses up?
First, let me say there's no foolproof way to keep people from getting defensive, but there are ways to lessen the likelihood that that will happen. Let's say your spouse is handling the checkbook and paying the mortgage, and you come to find out that the mortgage is paid late, or that there wasn't enough money in the account. Rather than saying, what were you thinking? Can't you manage money? This is the second time you've done, I'm taking over the, that's criticizing the person. Saying, Bob, I feel really anxious when the check bounces, when the mortgage gets paid late. I really need for us to figure out a way to keep that from happening. So the problem is that the mortgage isn't getting paid on time, or a check is bouncing, not that Bob is a financial neophyte who can't figure out his checkbook from his calculator. Well, but if it's okay, I'd like to go back for a minute to the manipulation kind of situation, and the sorts of things that I hear tend to be things like, for example, a mother who's in a nursing home, and let's say I'm the adult daughter, I'm visiting as much as I can tolerate given the demeanor of my mother in this pretend scenario, and the amount of time and energy that I have. And she is making manipulative statements to me. Like, what do you imagine she might be saying to me?
Your siblings come to visit me. Why can't you?
Now, fogging is an assertiveness technique where we agree with the kernel of truth in what the other person is saying without buying into their entire argument. So one of the benefits of fogging, and I'm going to fog you in just a moment, is that when we're not fighting back or explaining or getting the other person to understand, we are limiting the amount of ammunition that they have to come back with another statement. We're taking the wind out of their sails. So if you were to say to me, well, all of your siblings come and see me every day, which may or may not be true, one fogging response could be, I know that they come more frequently than I do. Or I might say, it sounds like you're feeling really lonely. Now, is she going to argue that she's feeling lonely? Or is she going to argue with me that my siblings really do come more than I? Probably not. And is there anything else you can think of as my pretend mother for the moment in the nursing home that might be try to manipulate me into coming more frequently?
Let's see. I can't believe how selfish you are.
I could say, you know what, Mom? There might be some truth to that. Or I could say, I can certainly see how it would feel that way to you. Or I might, depending on how, if I have a relationship, obviously, with this person, I have some idea of how they might respond to humor. I might say, can you imagine that you actually, out of the 5 of us, you raised someone to be as selfish as I am? How did that happen? So sometimes you're using humor, but you're not buying into the idea that you're bad and you should do something differently.
Well, here's another one. I'm not going to be around forever, you know.
That's true. That's really true. I know that. Or I might say, if it's true, and I'm really going to miss you when you're gone. And I'd like to make the best use of our time while we are together. So how could we do that, Mom?
Well, you took the wind out of my sails. Well, here's another one. I put you through college, and this is what I get?
Again, you're trying to get me to change my behavior. And before I respond to that, I just want to say, I am not saying that we should never be open to changing our behavior. What I'm saying is, when we have decided quite clearly how we want to navigate a particular situation, and someone is trying to knock us off our center and do something else, and do it in a way that's manipulative, that's when fogging comes in handy. I personally think that any time someone criticizes us, it behooves us to really kind of look at the situation and say, well, what do I think about this? Do I think I should be coming more frequently? Is this something that I can do without losing my mental health entirely by visiting this person who really triggers and stirs up a lot of aggravation? But in response to your, I put you through school, I could simply say something like, that was such a thoughtful and generous thing for you to do, and I really appreciate it. I'm not saying, oh my God, I'm such a schmuck. I'm going to come twice on Sundays and once every day, and I'll stay for at least 2 hours. She's trying to make me feel guilty, but I'm not buying into it. I'm not buying it.
And we have one last one. You're going to be sorry.
That could be. I might really be sorry. and fogging responses are short, and the other person is like waiting for something else so that they have ammunition. I think one of the things that we do that often doesn't work is we try to explain our position to someone who isn't interested in our position. They just want to have their own way. So you can explain all you want, and it gets you absolutely nowhere.
But how do you work in a policy at the same time? An explanation of the library policy. Well, you know, if your video is 7 days late, then you really do owe $7.
Well, sometimes saying something like, well, in this situation I might not say this, but sometimes saying, if it were up to me, I might be more flexible with the policy, but it isn't up to me, and unfortunately, I'm going to need to respect the library's policy, and therefore I'm going to need to ask you to pay for the late item. Which is really, if you think about it, an assertive response. That I'm saying, I understand that it feels frustrating and it doesn't feel unfair. Unfortunately, it's not a policy that I have the power to alter. So I'm going to have to ask you for the $1.50.
And then there's the other situation where, well, somebody else did that for me. Why can't you?
Well, you know what, Mrs. Patron? That's a really good question, and it's not one that I'm sure that I can answer. I can't really speak for what anybody else has done in the past, and I'm sorry if we've been inconsistent as staff and confused these issues. We probably shouldn't be doing that.
If only I could have you next to me while we do our jobs.
If only I could have my most rational self with me all the time. I mean, we all struggle with this kind of stuff. One of the things that I wanted to mention is that when we are able on any level to build rapport with the person that we're feeling at odds with or is feeling in conflict with us, the better. And basically what I mean by that is when we feel like we are like the other person, we tend to have more understanding, we tend to have less conflict. I mean, if you think about it, that's what prejudice is about, is people, you know, when we don't understand someone who seems different from us. So if we can establish that in some way we are like the person that we're in conflict with, we stand a better chance of resolution. Let's say you're already at odds with someone, and it's a situation where both of you want a certain report to be done by its deadline, but you have different ideas about how that's to happen. So if you can say, you know, I realize that both of us essentially have the same goal, both of us really want to get this out on time, let's figure out a way we can do that. At least we're communicating that we're on the same page, we have the same goal. Another thing that helps to establish rapport, which sometimes people think of as being a little tricky, is subconsciously, and we don't think much about this and we're usually not aware of it, but subconsciously when we use the same kind of language, if someone, for example, is someone who thinks in terms of visuals, and you hear them talk and they say, I see this and I see that and this looks like this, you think, ah, that's one of the ways that their brain processes information when they're speaking. So when speaking back to them, I might say, oh, that paints a picture for me, or I see what you mean. So we're talking in a language that says, I hear you, I'm like you.
So in our last few minutes, do you want to just say any final words, further advice for our viewers in general?
I think I'd want to keep in mind, it starts with me, my remaining as calm as possible, lowering my reactivity, responding rather than reacting, and something that maybe I didn't stress as much as I could have is really helping the other person to feel heard. That comes before problem solving. And another thing that I think is important is asking people to be part of the solution. Like someone might say, you know, I really want blah, 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 and you might say, well, you know, that's not something I'm able to do, but what else do you imagine might satisfy you in this situation? Or if you're saying, I need for you to do X, I need for you to lower your voice when we're talking around my coworkers, asking them, would you be willing to do that? So you're asking for buy-in. People are more likely to follow through with behaviors that they agree to follow through with. So those are just some kind of last-minute snippets.
But I also think that what is essential is that we ourselves are in a good state, you know, that we're well rested, that we're well fed, that we're, you know,
Yeah.
and that's going to make it easier for us to stay on an even
Yes.
keel with someone, rather than
Self-care helps us to ground ourselves and be in a more resilient place so that we're better able to cope with whatever happens on any given day.
Okay, Donna, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to do 2 more shows. We're going to do grief and also body image.
Food and body image issues.
And how can we control what we eat. I'm looking forward to that. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. We hope to see you next time on Focus on Health.
Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.